From the most brutal fouls to the most emotional moments, goals you won't believe were scored, and saves that literally don't feel real, and from players caught cheating to moments you won't believe actually happened. These are the craziest moments in World Cup history. And first off, whilst getting injured just before the World Cup is every player's nightmare, imagine having your World Cup ruined by a bottle of aftershave. That's what happened to Spanish goalkeeper Santiago Canizares in 2002 at Spain's pre-tournament training base, as the Valencia shotstopper was Spain's #1 at the time after taking his club side to the Champions League final in 2001. But just before Spain were due to fly out to South Korea and Japan for the 2002 World Cup, he had a rare Butterfingers moment and dropped a bottle of cologne on his foot. His clumsiness alone should have convinced his head coach that this guy was not fit for a World Cup place, but unfortunately for Canizares, the bottle smashed on his foot and a piece of glass severed a tendon in his big toe, ending his World Cup, with Iker Casillas taking his place and subsequently becoming the country's established #1. But Canizares can console himself by knowing that at least one of his feet smells good. Now, the balls used in the World Cup are often controversial. From the mad swerves of the unsavable Jabulani ball at South Africa 2010 to the appalling Etrusca Unico at Italia 90. But imagine being so paranoid about the quality of the ball that you brought your own. That's exactly what happened at the 1930 World Cup, as Argentina and Uruguay both brought their own balls, with Argentina's ball coming from Scotland and Uruguay's from England. And that didn't cause any problems at the start of the tournament, although it might have been a factor in their dominant performances as they both battered their opponents. But when Argentina faced Uruguay in the final, something had to give, as both countries demanded to play with their own ball. Luckily, FIFA's president at the time, Gilles Rimet, was rather diplomatic and suggested they play the first half with one ball and the second half with the other. So Argentina used their ball for the first half and were 2-1 ahead at the break, but in the second half, Uruguay's ball was used and Uruguay scored 3 goals, including 1 goal by a player with just one arm, to win the final 4-2. And did the balls make a difference? Well, both sides won all their matches easily until they had to play with a different ball. And there's plenty of mad, crazy stories to come, including a pitch invasion by a sheikh and even a doctor getting a World Cup medal. But let's stick with Uruguay for our next story, which proves that sometimes players do get hungry on the football pitch. Luis Suarez already had a reputation going into the Brazil 2014 World Cup. He'd been banned twice already in his career for biting players, getting a 7-match ban while at Ajax and a 10-game ban for munching on Chelsea's Branislav Ivanovic while playing for Liverpool. So you could probably guess what happens next. Suarez was the hero of the previous match, scoring twice to knock England out of the World Cup, but he quickly went from hero to villain in the 79th minute of the match against Italy when he took a bite out of Giorgio Chiellini. Then Suarez fell over holding his face and pretending that he'd hurt his teeth, which might have been a slightly believable story had he not already chomped his way through several other players during his career. But incredibly, the referee, who had already sent off an Italian player early in the game, somehow missed Suarez's attempt to snack on the Italian defender and then even ignored Chiellini when he showed the referee the bite marks on his shoulder. While Italy were complaining about Suarez's rather unique dietary requirements, Italy conceded a corner, which Uruguay then scored the winning goal from. Unfortunately for Suarez, FIFA had a bit of common sense for once, and they banned him for 9 matches. While Suarez seems unlikely to win any fair play awards, one team actually gamed the fair play rules to reach the next round, and then there's the story of the referee who got duped by an Australian accent. But first, let's go to the 2010 World Cup, where France did what France is best at: going on strike. The French arguably shouldn't have even been in South Africa, having qualified due to a sneaky handball by Thierry Henry in the playoffs against Ireland, and head coach Raymond Domenech's bizarre squad choice for 2010, leaving out Patrick Vieira and Karim Benzema, already had the makings of a disaster, and before their first match, Florent Malouda almost had a fight with Domenech and was benched for the dull, goalless draw against Uruguay. Already, pundits were saying Domenech had lost control of the team, but at halftime in the second match, he had a huge row with Nicolas Anelka and then subbed Anelka for the second half. France lost the game 2-0, but when Anelka was sent home for the tournament, his teammates had had enough. They went on strike, refusing to train, and then hiding in the team bus with the curtains drawn before eventually writing a letter opposing Anelka's exclusion from the squad. The embarrassment from the strike and from finishing bottom of their group in South Africa saw Domenech sacked, and his successor then decided to ban the entire World Cup squad from the next France match. But referees can have performances even worse than France in 2010, as 4 years earlier, English referee Graham Paul had a night to forget. He was in charge of Australia's match against Croatia, which would decide who reached the knockout stages. With so much at stake, the match got a little feisty, as players dived in with rough tackles, and Croatia's Josip Šimanić was one of those players as he hacked down Harry Kewell and was shown the yellow card. But Šimanić was fuming, and he protested to Graham Paul, shouting, "You're unbelievable," again and again. But Šimanić was born and raised in Australia, and his thick Aussie accent confused Paul, who mistakenly marked his number down in the Australia column of his notebook. Unfortunately for Paul, keeping track of who had been booked wouldn't get any easier, as both sides had a player sent off, and there were penalties and penalty appeals, and with the scores tied at 2-2, Šimanić committed a double foul, pulling down Mark Vidica and then hacking Joshua Kennedy, so he got another yellow card. But for some reason, the referee didn't pull out the expected red card that should have followed it, so Šimanić just kept playing, and later committed another bad tackle and was booked again, and this time, finally, Paul did give him the red card. But after giving Šimanić 3 yellow cards in one game, Paul saw his dream of refereeing the World Cup final go up in smoke, and he admitted his mistake and then retired a year later. And daft yellow card rules also helped this next team reach the knockout stages of the World Cup. Group H was probably the toughest group to call at Russia 2018, especially when Japan beat Colombia 2-1 in their opening game. In Japan's second game, they drew 2-2 with Senegal, meaning both sides were tied on 4 points apiece, and they also had both scored and conceded the same number of goals, and neither team had a head-to-head advantage as the game between the two was tied. And so in the final match, Japan were losing 1-0 when, in the other match, Colombia scored to go 1-0 up against Senegal, and that meant that Japan and Senegal had identical records. If the scores remained the same, the group ranking would be decided on fair play, meaning Japan would reach the knockout rounds as they had fewer yellow cards. So, rather than push for an equalizer against Poland and risk a yellow card, Japan played a very safe and conservative final 15 minutes of the game, opting to play for the loss rather than risk a Polish second goal or a flurry of yellows that would have seen them eliminated. While teams in the past have adopted similar unsportsmanlike tactics to ensure the match finishes in a draw, like West Germany and Austria at the 1982 World Cup, nobody has done it to try to qualify through the fair play rule. But Japan's 15 minutes of passing the ball around the defense nearly backfired, as Senegal came close to scoring a goal which would have eliminated Japan. But despite being booed by the fans in Volgograd, Japan's gamble paid off as they qualified with 4 yellow cards to Senegal's 6, but they then lost in the knockout rounds to Belgium. If you think that's crazy, wait till you hear why you shouldn't eat Italian food at the World Cup. But before that, did you know that an ophthalmologist in America was once given a World Cup medal? That's because playing for your country at the World Cup is the biggest honor, and any injury ahead of the World Cup can be devastating. Brazilian footballer Tostão was one of the greatest of all time. He was voted in the top 5 Brazilian players of the 20th century and had an incredible striking partnership with the legendary Pelé. But ahead of the 1970 World Cup, while playing for Brazilian side Cruzeiro, a ball struck him in the face and he suffered a detached retina. So, aged just 26, he was told that his career was over. But he didn't give up and instead flew to the USA for emergency surgery to save his eyesight. And despite a successful surgery, he struggled to get used to playing football again and was on the verge of not being allowed to go to the World Cup. But incredibly, he recovered enough to get called up for the World Cup and scored 2 goals in the knockout game against Peru. And so, when Brazil beat Italy 4-1 in the final, Tostão spent the last 20 minutes crying, overwhelmed with emotion as he realized Brazil were about to become World Cup champions. After being presented with the World Cup winner's medal, he actually gave his medal away to the ophthalmologist in Houston who saved his eyesight, and Tostão actually retired a year later and became a doctor himself before later becoming a TV pundit. And there's a famous TV pundit in England who embarrassed himself with some bathroom issues while on the pitch at the World Cup. But first, there's plenty of stories of kings and rulers interfering in domestic sports, but it's almost unbelievable that a member of royalty would actually be able to interfere in a World Cup match. But that's exactly what happened in 1982, when Kuwait became the first Arab nation to qualify for a World Cup. They started well, drawing their first game with Czechoslovakia 1-1 after conceding a penalty scored by Antonin Panenka, who ironically didn't score with a Panenka. But in their second game, everything went wrong for Kuwait as France completely outplayed them and found themselves 3-1 up with 20 minutes to go. When France scored to make it 4-1, Kuwait thought the goal was offside, so Sheikh Fahad Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, the head of Kuwait's FA, who's better known as Prince Fahad, told the Kuwait players to walk off the pitch and then came down from the stands and onto the pitch himself to argue with the referee. Prince Fahad, surrounded by his security guards, argued with the referee who, for some reason, gave in to the Kuwaiti Sheikh's pressure and changed his mind, disallowing the goal. While it didn't affect the outcome, as France scored again late on to win 4-1, the referee was banned for life for yielding to such pressure, and Kuwait lost their final game 1-0 and exited the World Cup. The pressure at the World Cup could make many players feel as if they might poo their pants, but one player actually did. There's something about Tottenham Hotspur and Italian food, with food poisoning from lasagna once famously ending their chances of reaching the Champions League. But in 1990, Italian food would also lead to the most embarrassing moment of then Tottenham Hotspur striker Gary Lineker's career. Lineker had been top scorer at the 1986 World Cup and had a dream start to Italy 90 when he scored after just 9 minutes in England's opener against Ireland. But he'd actually been feeling ill before the game, and then, during the match, he started to feel something wrong with his stomach. Midway through the second half, things got worse as he suddenly realized he needed to go to the bathroom right away. And then, when he lunged for the ball, disaster struck as his bowels relaxed and released everything that was inside them. Lineker quickly sat down on the ground, hoping the TV cameras wouldn't spot he had just pooed his pants, and one of his teammates came to ask if he was all right, and he admitted to him what had just happened as he shuffled along the grass trying to remove some of the stool before being substituted off. But his digestive system recovered in time for him to score 3 more goals at the '90 World Cup as he took England to the semi-finals. Rather than try to hide the incident, he's talked about it regularly as a TV pundit. But despite Lineker's best efforts, England couldn't win the World Cup in 1990. But back in 1966, England won and lost the World Cup in the same summer. Ahead of the 1966 World Cup, the Gilles Rimet Trophy was on display at Westminster Central Hall in London, but it was only guarded when the exhibition was open, so at other times, nobody was watching football's most famous trophy. On March 20th, thieves broke in and stole the World Cup trophy, and the next day, the English FA received a ransom note demanding £150,000 and threatening to melt the trophy down for gold. The police got to work trying to find who stole the trophy, and the FA quickly made a replica of the trophy in case the real trophy was never found. The police eventually arranged to meet the ransomers and pay the ransom, but instead of money, they filled a suitcase with old newspapers and met with the ransomers. Before they could get the trophy back, the ransomer ran away and was pursued and caught by the police. But the trophy was still missing until a week later when a man was walking his dog Pickles near his home in South London when suddenly Pickles smelled something and took his owner to a garden hedge where he found a package which he opened to reveal the famous Gilles Rimet trophy wrapped in newspaper. He took the trophy to the police who told him that it didn't look like the World Cup, but after confirming what had happened and realizing that it was indeed the famous trophy, Pickles won Dog of the Year and became famous. England went on to win the World Cup, and England captain Bobby Moore lifted the trophy that had been left wrapped in a newspaper in a garden hedge. That trophy was eventually given to Brazil in 1970 to keep permanently as they'd won it 3 times. But in 1983 it was stolen again, this time from Brazil's Football Confederation building, and it was never recovered. Then, from last-minute winners to moments of pure controversy, the World Cup has produced some of the most iconic scenes in sporting history. These are the greatest World Cup goals in history.
He is an awesome force of nature! Brutal!
And starting at number 25, we roll back the clock to 1986 when Diego Maradona played one of the greatest World Cup campaigns in history, producing 10 goal involvements on his way to lifting the trophy. But one of his most iconic moments of the tournament was a goal that shocked the world after Maradona dribbled past a couple of players and passed to a teammate, the ball was hacked into the box by an English defender, Steve Hodge. While clearing his lines would have been preferable, it seemed to land in a position for goalkeeper Peter Shilton to claim. The shot stopper extended his arm to punch the ball away with Maradona running towards him. At 5'5", the superstar had no chance of reaching the ball with his head, so he mirrored Shilton's motion and raised his hand to meet the ball and flicked it into the empty net. The game was 1-0 with most of the second half still remaining, and incredibly, something even crazier would happen later in the game. the goal of the century, but we'll get to that later. From one all-time great to another, Cristiano Ronaldo's World Cup record is perhaps the only metric where the Portuguese sensation does not rank among the game's very best players. Despite scoring 8 times in 22 appearances, CR7 has never come particularly close to lifting the trophy, but that doesn't mean he hasn't produced unforgettable moments. In 2018, Portugal faced Spain during the opening game of Group B. Portugal's team was noticeably inferior, and few neutrals gave them a chance of beating their rivals. But there was a caveat. They had Ronaldo. Spain were leading 3-2 with 2 minutes left on the clock, and Portugal on the brink of suffering an opening day defeat when Ronaldo produced one of his greatest international tournament moments. He took an unstoppable 25-yard free kick, swerving it into the right-hand side of the net with David De Gea unable to get anywhere near it. But if Cristiano Ronaldo saved his greatest moments for the Champions League, Ronaldo Nazario saved his for the World Cup, scoring 15 goals in the international tournament. None were as important as his opening goal against Germany in the 0-2 final. The Brazilian lost the previous World Cup final 3-0 to France before spending much of the next 4 years sidelined through injury, with many critics suggesting that his time at the elite level may be over. But R9 somehow returned to fitness for the 0-2 World Cup and was in search of redemption. He had an iconic campaign, already scoring 6 goals to send Brazil to the final. But during the opening 45 minutes, the grand stage appeared a step too big for Ronaldo, as he missed 3 glorious opportunities. However, in the 67th minute, Rivaldo took a long-range shot at goal, which Oliver Kahn uncharacteristically spilled, allowing Ronaldo to tap the ball into the net and send Brazil into the lead. He scored a second goal shortly afterwards, winning the World Cup for Brazil and completing one of the game's greatest ever comeback stories. The trophy lift, 8 goals that tournament, and the Ballon d'Or that was awarded later that year ensured that R9 would be remembered as a true footballing icon for generations to come. While that night felt like it was all about one man, Argentina's second goal against Serbia in the 06 World Cup was about just every player on the team because they made 26 passes before scoring. After playing 25 beautiful 1- and 2-touch passes, Crespo backheeled the ball to Esteban Cambiaso, who smashed the ball into the net. Some even dubbed Argentina's football during the 06 World Cup as the birth of tiki-taka, as their possession-based football was played with an intricacy that the sport had never seen before. While a young Lionel Messi did not feature in the 26-pass goal, the 06 tournament was the first World Cup of his career. He'd go on to rewrite the history books later on in his career, but we'll get to that after watching some more crazy World Cup moments. Back to Brazil's 0-2 World Cup winning campaign. If there was one player who received the majority of the plaudits alongside R9, it was Ronaldinho. It was the young Paris Saint-Germain star's first World Cup tournament, and few fans outside of the French capital in Brazil knew of his unique talent. But after making 3 goal involvements in the first 4 matches, Ronaldinho was considered a major contender for the tournament's breakout star. His performance against England during the quarterfinals ensured that nobody forgot his name. After producing a sublime assist for Brazil's first goal of the game, Ronaldinho lined up a free kick to give his nation a chance of getting it to the lead. Many assumed that the Samba star would cross the ball into the box, but England's goalkeeper, David Seaman, naively wandered out of his goal to meet any lofted pass to Brazil's attackers. Whether Dino meant it or not, the ball swerved harshly over the goalkeeper into the net to establish Brazil a 2-1 lead. England are no strangers to shocking goals during the latter stages of World Cup tournaments, but this time, the goal wasn't given. The Three Lions faced Germany in the last 16 of the 2010 World Cup. The Germans were clearly superior and dominated the game during the opening stages. As the first half approached its conclusion, the score was 2-1 to Germany when Jermaine Defoe nudged the ball to Lampard. The Chelsea star did the impossible and hit the ball over Manuel Neuer's head, bouncing under the crossbar and over the line. Lampard wheeled away in celebration, only to discover that the referee hadn't awarded the goal. Had the goal been given, England would have been level at 2-2, but ended up losing the game 4-1. It was one of the tournament's most controversial moments and a large part of the reason that goal line technology was introduced in the following tournament. Since goal line technology was introduced in 2014, VAR was implemented for the 2018 tournament, and with good reason. Hand of God goals, balls that crossed the line but weren't given, and shocking referee calls dominate the early stages of our list. We can't forgive refereeing errors for Maradona's goal against England and Lampard's ghost goal against Germany, but how the officials didn't spot that Carlos Tevez was standing in an offside position when he scored against Mexico during the 2010 tournament is unbelievable. After the goalkeeper spilled the ball in the 25th minute, Lionel Messi tapped the ball to Tevez, who was standing around 3 yards offside. The forward headed the ball into the net, half expecting to see the linesman raise his flag. Somehow, the goal was given, as Argentina went on to win the last 16 tie 3-1, continuing Mexico's curse at that stage of the tournament. Robin van Persie's header against Spain in 2014 was as shocking as Tevez's against Mexico in 2010, but this time it was for pure genius rather than due to controversy. It was the opening game of the tournament and the first time either side had played a World Cup match since their violent 2010 final. The Dutch were seeking revenge, but went behind due to a Xabi Alonso penalty during the game's early stages. However, Robin van Persie's Puskas-nominated leaping header before halftime leveled the score. The goal was like no other scored on the world stage. Daley Blind played an exquisite lofted pass into the Spanish box, but it looked troubling for RVP to get under control of. The Dutchman ran 20 yards to produce a unique diving header that looped over Iker Casillas' head. The game ended 5-1, providing the Dutch with redemption for the 2010 final. Roger Mila's corner flag dance celebration during the 1990 World Cup made him one of the tournament's cult heroes. At the 1994 competition, he strengthened his legacy further by becoming the oldest player to score a World Cup goal. At 42 years and 39 days old, Mila came off the bench against Russia to score his 5th World Cup goal, breaking his own record as the tournament's oldest goal scorer. Given he was now in his early 40s, he didn't have the energy to produce another iconic corner flag celebration, but the fans back in Cameroon still celebrate his greatness today. Legend. Speaking of stars which gave lesser footballing nations iconic moments, Scotland's Archie Gemmill scored one of the greatest solo efforts in the tournament's history to secure an unlikely victory against the Netherlands near the peak of their total football powers. In the 68th minute, Gemmill played a 1-2 with Kenny Dalglish and wriggled through the left flank of the Dutch defense to score a breathtaking goal. The game ended 3-2 for Scotland, but the British nation were still eliminated from the group stages on goal difference. While Gemmill's brace against the Dutch were the only World Cup goals of his career, the next strike on our list broke Ronaldo Nazario's record for most career goals scored by one player at the tournament. It came in the 12th minute of Germany's iconic 7-1 2014 semi-final win over Brazil, as Klose scored a rebound which wasn't extraordinary, typified his extraordinary career in which he was always dependable when his nation needed him most. Germany never lost a World Cup match in which he scored, and that certainly didn't change during the 2014 semi-final. While Brazil have won the tournament on 5 occasions, they've still suffered some humiliating moments. And if the 2014 semi-final was the worst of the bunch, then the 98 final defeat to France follows closely behind in 2nd or 3rd place. But that night wasn't just about Brazilian failure. The French were magnificent and led by one genius midfielder, Zinedine Zidane. The midfielder was gracious with the ball at his feet and taught the Brazilians a footballing lesson with his control, flair, and passing range. He netted twice that night, but neither goal was scored with the finesse many would associate with Zidane. He scored both goals with his head, demonstrating that he had a different, more industrious side to his game. While Zidane was a magician on the ball, he was also capable of being a dog and sticking his head in where it hurts. He'd use his head in another World Cup final 8 years later, this time to remarkably different effect. But we'll get onto that night after we've seen some more great World Cup goals. Few greater goals have been scored during recent tournaments than Luka Modric's group stage long-range strike against Messi's Argentina in 2018. With Croatia already leading 1-0 going into the final 10 minutes, Modric picked up the ball at 30 yards from goal, shimmied one away, then the other, opened up a shooting opportunity before unleashing a long-range effort past Willy Caballero. The goal helped to secure a 3-0 win on the night, producing one of Croatia's greatest World Cup wins. The underdog European nation went on to make an unlikely charge to that competition's final, resulting in Modric becoming the first player to take the Ballon d'Or away from Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi in 10 years. Based on Modric's goal against Messi's Argentina alone, he deserved it. Takuma Asano's 83rd minute goal against Germany in the 2022 World Cup may not have won him the Ballon d'Or, but it sent Japan utterly berserk. The opening day Group E fixture got underway in predictable style. Germany opened the scoring in the 33rd minute thanks to an Ilkay Gundogan penalty. The four-time winners looked set to secure the points until Ritsu Duan equalized for Japan 15 minutes from time. Even had the Japanese only drew the game, it would have been among the greatest results in their history. But when Asano expertly controlled a lofted ball as if he were prime Dennis Bergkamp and found the back of the net to put Japan up 2-1, he became a national icon. Japan held on to complete a late turnaround and win the game before eventually progressing to the knockout stages. As for Germany, they suffered an embarrassing group stage exit. It was a similar story in 1998 as reigning champions Brazil faced Norway. Given that the Scandi nation had only previously participated at 2 World Cup tournaments, nobody gave them a chance against a team that featured R9, Rivaldo, and Roberto Carlos. However, it took longer than anticipated for Brazil to take the lead, with Bebeto opening the scoring 12 minutes from time. But the Norwegians weren't willing to give up. An 83rd minute goal from Tore Andre Flo leveled the game before Norway were awarded a penalty 5 minutes later. Kjetil Rekdal stepped up to take the spot kick with the opportunity to score the most iconic goal in his nation's history. He smashed the ball to the keeper's right, finding the back of the net. The next greatest World Cup goal is not a story of an underdog, but one of a star establishing himself on the world stage. By the time of the 2018 World Cup, Kylian Mbappe was already one of football's hottest prospects, but he was tipped to eclipse the careers of Messi and Ronaldo after his performance against Argentina. 10 minutes into the game, the 19-year-old picked up the ball midway inside his own half and steamed past several Argentine defenders. He carried the ball into the box like an Olympic sprinter, eventually being taken down inside the box to win the penalty that put France 1-0 up in a match that finished 4-3. France are arguably the greatest international team of the last 30 years, having won 2 World Cup trophies and reaching the final on 2 additional occasions. But one of their most iconic goals came in a World Cup final that they lost. In 2006, Zidane was on the brink of retirement, but played a blinder during the World Cup to take France to the final against Italy. In the 7th minute, Zizou scored a Panenka from the penalty spot, which bounced off the bar before crossing the line. The Frenchman looked set to win the World Cup in his final match as a pro, but Italy equalized, forcing the game to extra time, where he famously headbutted Materazzi and received a red card before watching his team lose in the penalty shootout that followed. If 2006 was heartbreaking for France, then 2022 was agonizing because Lionel Messi's brilliance saw them lose another World Cup final. Like Zidane 16 years earlier, Messi was playing sensationally in what looked set to be his final World Cup. He scored a penalty after 22 minutes to put Argentina into the lead, but after a crazy French comeback, normal time ended 2-2, forcing the game to extra time. In the second half of extra time, Messi scored arguably the most iconic tap-in in history to make the score 3-2 and put Argentina on the brink of history. Once again, France equalized before Argentina won on penalties, securing Messi's legacy as the GOAT. While it was not a complete one-man show, Messi's 2 World Cup final goals dragged his nation to win the final. And as Messi celebrated, Mbappe watched on gloomily. Had France won that final, Mbappe may have had the greatest World Cup legacy of any player in football history. He scored a hat-trick to take Argentina all the way to penalties, including a volley from the edge of the box to square the game after 80 minutes. At many stages during that night, it looked like it would be Mbappe's night. He'll have to make do with scoring one of the most iconic strikes in the tournament's history and becoming the first player to score a total of 4 World Cup final goals. But while Mbappe's goal against Argentina was memorable for being clutch as much as it was for being a moment of world-class skill, Bergkamp's against the same nation in 1998 is all about the technique. During the quarterfinals, Frank de Boer played a long ball uncharacteristic of the Dutch national team. The pass progressed the Netherlands up the pitch, but turning it into an immediate goal-scoring opportunity looked impossible until Bergkamp did the unthinkable. With the ball traveling over his head, he controlled it effortlessly, took a touch to get past the defender, and half-volleyed it into the net to score a goal so artistic that it belongs in an art gallery. The goal was so great that supporters know it as a moment of extraordinary skill, but what is less known is that it was a 90th minute winner to send the Dutch to the semifinals, making it almost as clutch as Mbappe's goal in 22. Scoring a goal better than Bergkamp's against Argentina is practically impossible, but we believe Maxi Rodriguez's goal against Mexico in '06 required a slightly higher level of technique. Things were getting desperate for the Argentines, and a penalty shootout appeared likely. Then, the ball was crossed to Rodriguez, who was standing on the edge of the box and seemingly not in a shooting position. His best option appeared to be to control the ball with his feet and to beat his man to play a cross into the box. But out of nowhere, Rodriguez controlled the ball with his chest and volleyed the ball into the net, scoring a truly unstoppable goal. The insane finish predates XG models, but if it didn't, we think it would have been a lower probability than any other goal scored in the World Cup. Whereas Iniesta's World Cup winning goal against the Netherlands in 2010 could have been scored by an average player in an ordinary game, but to finish so coolly in a game of such magnitude can only be done by an all-timer. The final between Spain and the Netherlands was supposed to be an exhibition of football artistry, but turned into a brawl, as strong challenges were made by both teams. Neither side were able to find an opening during normal time, and so the final went to extra time. With minutes left on the clock, the final looked destined to go to penalties. It was almost unthinkable for the Spanish to leave a final that many believed had their name written on it to go to the lottery of a penalty shootout. But Spain's blushes were spared when Cesc Fabregas passed the ball to the unmarked Iniesta, who finished from inside the box to put Spain 1-0 up. They held on to their lead and won their first World Cup trophy, while Iniesta scored one of the most memorable tournament-winning goals in history. Iniesta, Bergkamp, Mbappe, Messi, and Zidane all share one trait. While they were the talisman, they played for world-class nations that might still get the job done without them. But when Colombia faced Uruguay in the last 16 of the 2014 World Cup, there was one player on the pitch who was head and shoulders above everyone else: James Rodriguez. It took a moment of genius to separate the two South American nations. The ball dropped to James Rodriguez 30 yards out, facing away from the goal. He expertly controlled it with his chest, swiveled round, and volleyed a Puskás-nominated goal into the left corner. Rodriguez's goal was out of this world, and it put him alongside the gods of the sport, as it has often been ranked among the greatest World Cup goals of all time. But while Rodriguez's strike might have showcased the best technique the World Cup has ever seen, there's still more iconic finishes to come. And few players in world football can claim to be as iconic as Pelé, aka the original GOAT. The Brazilian striker scored 12 World Cup goals and lifted the trophy 3 times, but the first goal that he scored as a 17-year-old against Sweden in the 1958 final is the most memorable. The ball was crossed to Pelé, but unlike any ordinary forward of the era, he didn't make a hopeful attempt to head the ball into the net. Instead, he controlled it with his body, showcased some Brazilian flair to dink it over a defender, and volleyed that ball into the net to put Brazil 3-1 up. They won the final 5-2, with Pelé adding his second before the final whistle. It was a legendary goal for a player of any age, let alone someone that would still be in school in most parts of the world. The goal was a clear sign that the man who'd be considered football's GOAT for decades had been born. But if anyone in the 20th century were ever going to rival Pelé's GOAT status, it was Maradona, the player that we started this list with. The goal that he scored with his hand against England in the '86 World Cup threatened to tarnish his legacy. How could a player so legendary commit an act of cheating that was so shameful? But everyone outside of England forgot about their disappointment in Maradona when he scored a goal so brilliant that the one he scored with his hand felt insubstantial. Individual goal in World Cup history. Maradona redeemed himself. Argentina won 2-1 with 2 of the craziest goals the game has ever seen, and eventually lifted the trophy with their star man producing an iconic campaign. While Pelé lifted the trophy on 3 occasions and scored 12 goals, he never produced a single moment as spectacular as Maradona's against England. But everyone's seen the best World Cup goals, but what about the goalkeepers? A last-minute block or a penalty save can be the difference between glory and elimination. And some of these saves are out of this world, from scorpion kicks to saves of the century, from national heroes who live off cigarettes and booze to goalkeepers labeled as clowns. These are the craziest saves in World Cup history. And starting off in South Korea, because whilst K-pop group BTS might be performing at the 2026 World Cup final back in 2018, another Korean was wowing the football stage with his K-pop looks. South Korean goalkeeper Cho Hyun-woo wasn't even expected to be the country's #1 keeper going into the tournament, and with the Taeguk Warriors already effectively eliminated in the first 2 games, everyone thought Germany would stroll to a routine win against Korea in the final group stage game. But Cho Hyun-woo had other ideas. He made save after save as Germany failed to score in 28 shots and made a huge block from a Toni Kroos shot towards the end of the match before Korea scored 2 late goals to knock Germany out of the World Cup. After the tournament, his dyed hair and light skin earned Cho Hyun-woo cosmetics and beauty contracts, even if he never achieved his dream of playing in Europe. But this next keeper won't be selling hair care products, but he certainly was flamboyant, extravagant, eccentric. Well, basically, he was French. Fabien Barthez did what many thought was impossible. He replaced Peter Schmeichel at Manchester United, but for the France national team, his heroics helped Les Bleus go all the way to win the World Cup, conceding just 2 goals in 7 matches. In the final, he made a classic flamboyant save, rushing out and acrobatically jumping to punch the ball away and deny Brazil's Ronaldo a goal-scoring opportunity, but injuring the Brazilian in the process, which might have helped him keep a clean sheet in the final and lift the World Cup. And there's plenty of eccentric goalies coming up, including a guy who designed his own shirts, one who got sent to prison, and another who basically invented the sweeper keeper and gifted his opponents an open goal. And speaking of open goals, sometimes a chance will come along that seems impossible for a striker to miss, and that was the case for Chile's Waldo Ponce in their 2010 World Cup match against Honduras. In the 65th minute, Ponce headed the ball into what looked like a gaping open net, but somehow Honduras' Noah Valladares dived back across the goal to keep the ball out. But the shy shot stopper nicknamed The Secret couldn't prevent his team from elimination, as despite a clean sheet against Switzerland, Honduras failed to score in any of their games. And the World Cup has seen its fair share of eccentric goalkeepers, from Barthez to Andre Onana, who was so crazy he actually got sent home. But one goalie is fondly remembered for scoring goals and wearing incredible self-designed kits. Jorge Campos was Mexico's goalkeeper at the 1994 World Cup, where he saved the opening penalty of a shootout against Bulgaria with an impressive dive. But in typical Mexican fashion, they were eliminated in the round of 16 after 3 Mexicans missed their spot kicks. But maybe Campos should have taken one himself. After all, he scored 35 goals in his career. Not bad for a goalkeeper. And his colorful goalie kits were so iconic, they became must-have fashion items. But he's best known for his all-out goalkeeping style, where the penalty box seems meaningless to him. And where acrobatic saves are the norm, Campos doesn't play by the rules, he makes them. And this next goalie also doesn't play by the rules. Germany's Manuel Neuer once made a save so crazy it changed the rules of football. Germany were playing England in the first knockout round of the 2010 World Cup and had been cruising at 2-0 when an England goal changed the momentum of the game. And seconds later, England's Frank Lampard hit a long-range shot against the underside of the crossbar, and the ball bounced on the ground before Neuer made an incredible stretch to grab the ball and pull it away from the goal. It was such a good save that everybody in the world thought that it was a goal, probably because the ball had crossed the goal line by half a meter. But the Germans' quick reflexes and fluid relationship with the truth meant that the referee saw it as a world-class save and not a goal for England. Neuer's heroics were later honored by FIFA, who created goal line technology to prevent such wonder saves from happening again. But being an eccentric goalie can be tough, and one keeper even got labeled a clown by English manager Brian Clough after a crucial qualifying match. But that clown was called Jan Tomaszewski, and he would have the last laugh as he had the game of his life to help Poland qualify for the 1974 World Cup. In that tournament, Poland very nearly reached the final, but they faced hosts West Germany in their final group stage game in what has been dubbed the Frankfurt water fight. As the ground was so waterlogged, it resembled a swamp, and fire hoses were used to pump water off the pitch. Poland needed to win the game to reach the final, and Tomaszewski did everything he could, including making an incredible save from an Uli Hoeneß penalty kick. But unfortunately for Tomaszewski, the goalkeeper in the opposite net, Germany's Sepp Maier, was also having the game of his life, with his cat-like reflexes keeping out shot after shot from the Poles, and West Germany went on to win the World Cup while Poland beat Brazil to finish third. But while Tomaszewski had been labeled a clown, this next goalie was named El Loco, or the Madman. But the truth is that René Higuita changed football, becoming one of the first goalies who was comfortable with the ball at his feet, allowing Colombia to play as if they had 11 outfield players. But in 1990, it all went wrong in the round of 16 against Cameroon when Roger Milla stole the ball from him and scored in what was one of the biggest goalkeeping errors in World Cup history. Colombia were subsequently knocked out by Cameroon, and Higuita would miss the 1994 World Cup as he was in jail. But his most famous save was this scorpion kick in a friendly match against England, lighting up what was otherwise a rather dull game. And even though that scorpion kick was technically not at the World Cup, we feel we've got to include it here. But this next goalie showed the human side to the game by using the biggest moment of his career to honor a fallen friend. In 2018, Croatian goalkeeper Daniel Subasic made this incredible penalty save against Denmark's Christian Eriksen and followed it up with another couple of penalty saves to become the first goalkeeper to save 3 penalties in a World Cup shootout since 2006. He celebrated those saves by lifting his jersey to reveal a picture of his former teammate Hrvoje Čustić, a Croatia under-21 international who was playing alongside Subasic in 2008 when, during a match, he collided with a concrete wall next to the pitch and died, aged 24. Subasic wore his image on his undershirt for years to honor his memory, but FIFA didn't look so kindly on the gesture and banned Subasic from revealing the shirt in future matches. The USA's goalkeeping department is looking a bit sketchy these days, especially as their current number 1 makes this kind of error on almost a weekly basis. But back in the day, the US was stacked with top shot stoppers, and in 2014, Tim Howard produced a goalkeeping display for the ages. Howard almost didn't make it as a goalie because he suffered from Tourette's and OCD, so as a kid, he struggled to keep his focus on the game, but he learned to use his condition as an advantage, playing for Manchester United and Everton and earning the nickname Secretary of Defense. At the 2014 World Cup, he smashed the record for most saves in a World Cup match, making 16 saves in the knockout round match against Belgium, and even starting an internet trend hashtag things Tim Howard could save. At his heroic performance forced the game into extra time when Belgium found a way past him with Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku scoring in quick succession, as, unfortunately for Howard, the defense in front of him wasn't enough to keep Belgium's golden generation from scoring. And these aren't even the craziest saves, as still to come is the incredible Black Spider, a goalie who lost an eye and a save that made France's star player go insane. But this next save was a vital stop in the last minute of a knockout tie. But the craziest thing is, this save wasn't even made by a goalkeeper. It's fair to say that Luis Suarez has a bit of a reputation for controversy, and while he's just as famous for munching on opponents as he is for scoring spectacular goals, he also embodies Uruguay's win-at-all-cost attitude. In the 2010 World Cup quarterfinal against Ghana, the game was tied at 1-1 with 120 minutes on the clock. But Ghana were pressing, and in a last-gasp goal line scramble, Suarez made 2 blocks on the goal line, the first with his knee, but the second with his hand. Unfortunately for Suarez, he isn't a goalkeeper, so his incredible save earned him a red card and Ghana a penalty. But somehow, Ghana's Asamoah Gyan hit the crossbar from 12 yards, and then Uruguay won the penalty shootout to reach the semi-finals, and Luis Suarez declared that he had made the best save of the tournament, although I'm not sure if Ghana's fans would agree with that. And in 2002, it was the USA who were on the end of some incredible saves when they faced Germany in the quarterfinals. In goal for the Germans was the legendary Oliver Kahn, known as the Titan or King Khan. He often rushed out of his goal and made himself so big that the strikers couldn't find a way around him. Against the USA, he made 2 spectacular saves. One, a low dive to fingertip a landed Donovan shot around the post, and then, using his trademark huge stance, he saved a one-on-one against Donovan, which the striker would have expected to score. And Germany went all the way to the World Cup final that year before losing to Brazil. But while Oliver Kahn is a legend, this next goalkeeper is so good that they named the trophy for the world's best keeper after him. Russian goalie Lev Yashin is the only goalkeeper ever to win the Ballon d'Or. Nicknamed the Black Spider, the Dynamo Moscow and Soviet Union shot stopper won the 1960 European Championships and showed his skills to the world in the 1962 World Cup, making impossible saves like this one in the quarterfinal against Chile, where the striker seemed absolutely certain to score. And this incredible save came despite him conceding a goal directly from a corner earlier in the tournament, and in the following year, he was the goalkeeper for the whole world in an England versus the rest of the world match. And he told reporters the secret to his success was to have a smoke to calm his nerves and a strong drink to tone his muscles. And when it comes to saving one-on-ones in crucial games, not many saves get bigger than this next one. Iker Casillas first got his place as Spain's #1 when his rival cut his toe on an aftershave bottle, but he quickly cemented his place as one of the world's top keepers, and Spain finally looked like they could break their curse and win the World Cup. But Casillas made an error against Switzerland, and Spain lost their opening match, but after that, they pushed on all the way to the final. And with scores locked at 0-0, Arjen Robben was through on goal and looked 100% certain to score. But Casillas stuck out a leg and somehow prevented a certain goal. And then he made another huge save from Robben, and Spain scored toward the end of extra time to win the game 1-0 and finally lift the World Cup. But this next save is so good, it's just known as the save. Italy's goalkeeper in 1982 was the legendary Dino Zoff, who had once come runner-up in the Ballon d'Or. And in 1982, he was captain of the national team. In the late stages of a crucial group stage match against Brazil, a free kick was whipped into the box, and a Brazilian player hit a rocket header toward the bottom corner. It had so much power that Brazilian players were already celebrating a goal, but somehow Zoff got down low and not only saved the ball, but also somehow managed to catch it. That save led Italy to victory, and they would go on to win the 1982 World Cup, with Zoff being the oldest player ever to play in a World Cup final, showing that even at 40 years old, he still had insane reflexes. And sometimes a save is so good, you could say, stick it in the Louvre. And this next save could belong in an art gallery, as it is a Banksy. A Gordon Banksy, that is. Dubbed the save of the century, this save by England goalkeeper Gordon Banks is just insane. And so was his career, as when he was young, he worked as a coal bagger that built his upper body strength before becoming the World Goalkeeper of the Year 6 times. And later in his career, he would lose his sight in one eye, but still get named the best goalkeeper in North America's soccer league. But in the 1970 World Cup, England faced Brazil, and Banks made his famous save as Brazil's Jairzinho beat his man and crossed the ball to Pelé, who headed the ball low toward the bottom corner. But Banks dived and pushed it up and over the bar, and afterward, Pelé admitted that he thought it was a goal and also said he'd scored 1,000 goals in his career, but people only talk about the one he didn't score. But even Banks couldn't stop Brazil winning 1-0, and in the next round, Banks had an illness and couldn't play without him. England lost to West Germany. But the next save would make a legendary player so angry that he would end up ruining his legacy. Italy's defense in 2006 was rock solid, conceding just one goal from open play all tournament, largely thanks to the shot-stopping abilities of the world's best goalkeeper at the time, Gianluigi Buffon. His save in the semi-final against Germany has been named as one of the best saves of all time, as the game was goalless and Germany were on the ascendancy when Lukas Podolski hit a powerful, swerving shot that seemed impossible to save, but Buffon tipped it over the bar, and Italy later scored twice to reach the final. And in that final against France, Buffon was a brick wall. Nothing could get past him. And toward the end of the match, a French cross came in and Zinedine Zidane headed it powerfully, and it appeared to be looping over Buffon and into the net. But somehow, Buffon managed to tip it over the bar, and you could see Zidane's frustration at being unable to score no matter what he did. And minutes later, that frustration would cause him to headbutt Marco Materazzi and get sent off, and then Italy would go on to win the World Cup on penalties. And of course, our craziest save also happened in the World Cup final, but isn't it funny how Frenchman Neil Maupay never played for his country, but ended up costing France the 2022 World Cup? Argentinian goalkeeper Emiliano Martinez was stuck as a bench warmer for Arsenal when Maupay smashed into Arsenal's first-choice keeper Bernd Leno, whose injury then gave Martinez his lucky break, and he impressed so much that he earned a £20 million move to Aston Villa and became Argentina's #1. At the Qatar World Cup, he would make the craziest save ever, as in the last minute of extra time, with the scores tied at 3-3, Randal Kolo Muani went one-on-one with Martinez and looked set to win the World Cup for France. But Martinez made himself big and stretched out a leg to instinctively save the shot, and that meant the game went to penalties. Emiliano Martinez showed his gamesmanship by distracting France's penalty takers and then saving a penalty from Kingsley Coman and forcing Aurelien Tchouameni to miss his spot kick. So, Argentina won the World Cup, and Martinez won the Golden Glove Award, which he then held like it was a rude male body part, and Lionel Messi got a shiny black coat. I wonder if he'll thank Neil Maupay for that. Then, But these are the craziest cheating moments in World Cup history. And let's start with one player who actually got away with cheating. Sort of. Jurgen Klinsmann might have got into the All-Star team of the 1990 World Cup, but some of his actions on the pitch were questionable at best. The German striker scored 3 goals at Italia 90, but is best remembered for one moment in the World Cup final when, in the 65th minute, he knocked the ball into the space past Argentina's Pedro Monzon, who flew in with a clumsy, late-sliding tackle that Klinsmann jumped over, but then, on landing, the German dived to the floor and flopped like a salmon while holding his face. So, the referee dramatically brandished the red card for Monzon and called for the medics to treat Klinsmann, all while TV replays show that there had been no contact whatsoever, and Germany went on to win the final 1-0 thanks to a dodgy penalty. And Argentina actually finished the match with 9 men, but while Klinsmann fooled the referee, he didn't fool fans around the world who now saw him as a cheating diver. And in England, his reputation was completely in the mud. But for some reason, Klinsmann decided he wanted a break from playing for teams that are actually good at football, so he made the move from Monaco to Tottenham Hotspur, where English fans and the media criticized him at first, but incredibly, after he scored on his debut, he performed a headfirst diving celebration that became so iconic that it was known as the Klinsmann dive, and was copied by school kids on pitches around the country as English fans liked how Klinsmann could laugh at himself. So, they actually forgave him, and he became a bit of a cult legend. But another German was to cheat against England a few years later, and his actions caused so much outrage that they actually changed the rules of football. As England were playing Germany in the knockout rounds of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, and it started badly, going 2-0 down early on. But then, England scored, and the momentum swung in the favor of the Three Lions. Moments after that goal, England attacked again, and Frank Lampard hit a shot off the underside of the crossbar, and the ball bounced about half a meter over the line, which was clear enough for everybody around the world to see on TV as an absolute clear goal. But somehow, the referee and linesman both failed to notice this, and so Germany goalkeeper Manuel Neuer quickly grabbed the ball and dragged it back out of the goal before the referee noticed, and Neuer later said, "I realized it was over the line, and I think the way I carried on so quickly fooled the referee into thinking it was not over." But luckily for Neuer, his cheating was ignored, and the media's anger was aimed at the match officials, with even Jurgen Klinsmann calling the decision disgraceful. And also, luckily for Neuer, England were a bit rubbish in that World Cup, so many England fans thought the team could have probably lost anyways. But his blatant cheating did lead to the introduction of goal line technology to stop such skullduggery from happening again. Some of our next cheats will probably never be forgiven, as some of their acts go far beyond gamesmanship and are a stain on football itself. And there's one cheat who even sabotaged his own country's World Cup, and some of the worst cheating isn't from the players on the pitch, but the officials off of it. But while cheating was easier to get away with in the past, these days, there's cameras everywhere. Just ask Cristiano Ronaldo, as during the 2006 World Cup quarterfinal match between England and Portugal, the match suddenly turned nasty, as England star striker Wayne Rooney was sent off after treading on Portugal's Ricardo Carvalho, and Rooney was adamant that it was not a red card. But Ronaldo went over to the referee and said something before he brandished the card, and it's thought that CR7 was trying to get his Man United teammate sent off. Then, just after Rooney's dismissal, Cristiano Ronaldo winked cheekily to the Portugal bench as if to tell him that his intervention had gotten Rooney the red card. Obviously, England lost on penalties, so Cristiano Ronaldo became hated in England, labeled a traitor, and booed every time he played. But Rooney himself just let the whole thing go and said that earlier in the match, he'd also been trying to get Ronaldo booked for diving, and that if he had the chance, he would have also tried to get Ronaldo sent off. And speaking of traitors, one player caused absolute national embarrassment in 2010, as France already went into the South Africa World Cup with plenty of question marks, as head coach Raymond Domenech was perceived as weak and arrogant, which is probably fair given that the previous time France got eliminated from a major tournament, Domenech had used the post-match interview to propose to his partner. How romantic? And France only got to the 2010 World Cup by cheating, as Thierry Henry handballed the ball twice to assist William Gallas's winning goal in extra time in the World Cup playoff against Ireland. When it comes to World Cup cheats getting caught, France got caught by karma in a big way, as their 2010 World Cup was a disaster. Domenech left key players like Patrick Vieira and Karim Benzema at home, and just before their first match, Florent Malouda wanted a fight with Dominic on the training pitch, and he had to be pulled away. But the real problems came in France's second match against Mexico, when Dominic was angry at Nicolas Anelka's lazy performance and benched him at halftime. In football, usually what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room, but this time, someone leaked what had allegedly been said at halftime, and the next morning, a French newspaper published on its front page all the expletives that Anelka had allegedly said to Dominic, and the whole of France was shocked. So, the French Football Association kicked Anelka off the team, and Patrice Evra said there was a mole in the team supplying stories to the press. Things then got so heated that the whole team went on strike and spent their training sessions sitting on the team bus before eventually ending their strike but still getting knocked out of the World Cup. Whoever the mole was, they got their comeuppance as the entire French team was banned for the first match after the World Cup. Several players were kicked off the team permanently, and Dominic and his staff were sacked. As well as national disgraces, still to come are global disgraces who cheated the world's youth out of their footballing dreams and offered bribes to make sure that their team won the World Cup, as well as some of the most egregious examples of play acting you'll ever see. But before that, let's have some praise for VAR, because without video assistant referees, this next act of cheating would have gone completely unpunished. In 2018, Brazil got off to a bad start at the World Cup, drawing with Switzerland and then being held by Costa Rica. And with the scores tied at 0-0, the Seleção couldn't find a way past Costa Rica. So Neymar decided he would do what he does best, and in the 77th minute, he flung himself to the floor dramatically after the slightest touch from defender Giancarlo Gonzalez, and Neymar's attempt to win an Oscar for Best Salmon Impression completely fooled the referee, who pointed straight to the penalty spot. But luckily, this was 2018, and FIFA had VAR, so the video assistant referee summoned the ref to the monitor for him to watch Neymar's silly dive again and again, and this time he realized that Neymar was trying to cheat, so canceled the spot kick, and Neymar's theatrics overshadowed all his skillful play, including a crazy rainbow kick. But unfortunately for Costa Rica, they couldn't hold out as Brazil scored two very late goals to win 2-0. But some countries are so desperate to reach the World Cup that they'll do whatever it takes, including using some very dodgy paperwork. And as the World Cup has been expanded to 48,000 teams, every country feels like they deserve to be at the World Cup. So when Malaysia realized they weren't very good at football in 2018, they started looking for more players from around the world with Malaysian parents or grandparents. But in 2025, they went too far and processed the eligibility for 7 players from Argentina, Brazil, Spain, and the Netherlands, sending all the paperwork to FIFA, including the birth certificates of them and their grandparents, to prove they were eligible to play for Malaysia. But it turned out that these documents were false. And when Malaysia thrashed Vietnam 4-0, someone made an anonymous complaint to FIFA, and they started digging and found that the players' grandparents had not been born in Malaysia at all, and FIFA banned all the players for a year, gave everyone involved a bunch of huge fines, and overturned the results of 6 matches, awarding Malaysia's opponents 3-0 wins, and the country's football reputation fell even lower than before. But at least Malaysia's fans got to see a few goals, which is more than can be said for the fans of the next 2 teams, as it's not every day that a match is so shameful it gets compared to being annexed by Nazi Germany. And if you watch the World Cup these days, you'll notice that all the teams in each group play their final games at the same time. That's because in 1982, Algeria surprised the world by beating West Germany, and that meant that West Germany were in 3rd place in the group before their final game against Austria. As Algeria had already played their final group game the day before, both Germany and their opponents Austria knew exactly what they needed to do to get through to the knockout rounds. And for Germany, it was simple. They had to win, but Austria had a better goal difference than Algeria, so Austria could actually afford to lose 1-0 to Germany and still finish ahead of Algeria and reach the knockout rounds. So anyone with any common sense would have run straight to the bookmakers and bet their house on a 1-0 win to West Germany. Unsurprisingly, when the game started, West Germany went all-out attack for 10 minutes until they scored, and then both sides played as if they'd signed a non-aggression pact, barely attempting to tackle each other, deliberately missing shots, and in general, just passing the ball around in circles while the crowd in Spain booed them for their blatant cheating and threw eggs at them. One fan even burned a German flag in anger, as this game utterly ruined ruined the sporting integrity of the tournament and was labeled a disgrace by the world's media. But it isn't the first time that playing the final group stage games at different times has caused controversy, as in 1978, Argentina was hosting the World Cup, but at the time, the country was under a dictatorship so brutal that free speech was banned. During the World Cup, the goalposts were painted with black marks to remember all the people that had been killed or disappeared by the dictatorship, and amid that environment, Argentina reached the second group stage where the two group winners would play each other in the final. But Argentina's group contained Brazil, so reaching the final was a tough ask, and after Brazil and Argentina drew 0-0, Brazil won their final match and had a superior goal difference, so Argentina would need to win their final match by at least 4 goals to reach the final, and they were playing a really strong Peru side. Controversially, before the match, the Argentina dictator and the U.S. State Secretary barged into the Peruvian dressing room and gave a speech about how important it was that Argentina win the game. And then, a few days after the match, Peru's government received a giant donation from Argentina. During the match itself, Argentina won 6-0, which, for a game in the latter stages of the World Cup, is a highly improbable scoreline. And Argentina went on to win the World Cup by beating the Netherlands in the final. But years later, 3 of the players on the Peru team admitted that the Argentine government had offered them bribes and threatened them to keep the bribes secret. So Argentina's 1978 World Cup win is probably the most tainted of all World Cups. But there's another controversial Argentina World Cup win coming up. But this next player on our list might have won the World Cup, but he also deserves an Oscar. In 2002, Turkey shocked the world by finishing 3rd at the World Cup, and they were only eliminated in the semifinals by eventual winners Brazil. But they also played Brazil in the group stage, and that match was much more controversial, as in the 86th minute, Alpaio Zalan fouled a Brazil player just outside the box and was sent off, but the referee gave Brazil a penalty, which they scored to go 2-1 up, and gave Unsal a second yellow card, reducing Turkey to 9 players. After the match, Rivaldo admitted that the ball didn't hit his face at all, and even though he tricked the referee, Rivaldo's theatrics didn't fool FIFA, who fined him for unsportsmanlike behavior. And he didn't win the Oscar for Best Actor either, as that went to Adrian Brody for The Pianist. But perhaps the biggest cheats in football are not the players on the pitch, but those who run the game from their ivory towers. FIFA's revenue from the World Cup and other sources is supposed to be put back into the game to support grassroots football, build new pitches, and give kids a chance to play the beautiful game no matter where they're from. But these next guys cheated all those poor kids in the world when they took FIFA's money for themselves. But cheats always get caught eventually, and it's hard to outrun the FBI when you're driving a mobility scooter. And that's exactly what happened to FIFA Executive Committee member Chuck Blazer, who was busted for tax evasion while riding his mobility scooter to a fancy Manhattan restaurant. Blazer, who was known as Mr. 10% for arranging a deal where he got a tenth of all CONCACAF sponsorship and TV deals, and who also used the Federation's money to buy himself a Humvee, knew that he was busted. But when confronted with a lifetime in the slammer, Blazer ratted out other FIFA executives and even wore a wire to FIFA meetings. In the end, some 12 FIFA executives were found guilty of crimes such as bribery, fraud, and money laundering, with the bribes totaling more than $100 million, which is a lot of football pitches for kids. But several other high-profile names avoided punishment to this day. But back to the football pitch, and probably the most famous act of cheating at the World Cup is Diego Maradona's so-called Hand of God in the 1986 World Cup in Mexico, where in the quarterfinals against England, Maradona jumped up for a challenge with England goalkeeper Peter Shilton, and then instead of trying to head the ball, he punched it with his hand. But the referee didn't see the blatant act of cheating, so the goal stood, and Argentina went on to fraudulently win another World Cup, with Maradona saying the goal was scored a little bit with the head of Maradona and a little bit with the hand of God. But the title of this video is Players Who Got Caught Cheating, and somehow Maradona got away with cheating in 1986. So let's fast forward 8 years to another incident involving Diego Maradona, who was still playing in 1994 at the USA World Cup. In their opening match against Greece, Maradona scored what would be his final goal of international football, and when he celebrated the goal up close to the camera, his bulging eyes explained why, as it was clear to everyone that he was on a bucket load of drugs. In his next game, he got 2 assists, but then the inevitable drugs test came, and Maradona inevitably failed it, testing positive for ephedrine doping, which he claimed came from an energy drink, but FIFA weren't buying it, especially as Maradona's drug problems were pretty well known at the time. They kicked Maradona out of the World Cup, and without their talismanic playmaker, Argentina quickly got knocked out of the World Cup and were sent home too, ending the international career of one of the sport's most legendary players. But football is all about emotion, from absolute joy to utter heartbreak, and the World Cup has had more than its fair share of emotional moments, from fans getting the gift of a lifetime, to players honoring those who mean everything to them, to teams suffering the cruelest of fates. These are the most emotional moments in World Cup history. And starting off, in 2022, Morocco made history as the first African and first Middle Eastern team to reach the semi-finals of the World Cup. After their 1-0 win against Portugal, fans in cities around the world lit flares and honked their car horns as they celebrated Morocco's triumph as a victory not just for one country, but for the whole of the Middle East. But Morocco's players celebrated in a different way. They wanted to honor the people most important to their success, their mothers. Morocco's Sofiane Boufal invited his mum onto the pitch and danced with her in joy in front of the whole world, showing everyone what was most important: family, and honoring those who sacrificed so much so that their sons could succeed. And he wasn't the only Moroccan to show the world how much his mum meant to him. In the previous round against Spain, Achraf Hakimi ran to his mum to celebrate after scoring the winning penalty, and also tweeted, "I love you, mum," after a picture of Hakimi hugging his mum went viral earlier in the tournament. Morocco had brought the players' families out with them to Qatar to give them that extra support, and it really paid off. Hakimi said after the win against Spain that his mother was a cleaner and father a street vendor, saying, "They gave up their lives for me, and today I play for them." And while Morocco were the first African side to reach the semifinals, Ghana should have reached that stage 12 years earlier, if not for one moment that still leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. With the score between Ghana and Uruguay tied at 1 goal each, their 2010 World Cup quarterfinal went to extra time, and the chance of making history weighed on Ghana's shoulders during that tense 30 minutes. While Ghana looked stronger, the game was quickly heading to penalties when, in the 120th minute, with almost the last kick of the match, a Ghana free kick led to a scramble in the box and fell to Dominic Adia, whose header flew towards goal. But standing on the line was Luis Suarez, who leapt with both hands and pushed the ball out of the goal. A deliberate handball, an act of cheating to deny what would have been the goal to send Ghana to the semifinals. Suarez was sent off, and Ghana had a penalty kick, which Asamoah Gyan smashed against the crossbar, and Ghana were in tears as they crashed out minutes later in the penalty shootout. Suarez showed no remorse, saying he made the best save of the tournament, but Ghana's anger lasted far beyond the tournament, and even 10 years after the incident, it still pains Ghana's players anytime they think about it. One of Ghana's players said, "We were crying, and you see someone who has cheated us is celebrating. How can I forgive him? Never, ever." And there's some tear-jerkers to come, including players who felt like they let down a whole nation, another who cried for the final 20 minutes of a match, and others who gave their country a moment of pride that means more than anything. But one World Cup hero decided to dedicate his victory to a friend who died a decade earlier. In 2018, Daniel Subasic did something no other goalkeeper had done in the past 12 years. He saved 3 penalties in a World Cup shootout against Denmark to take Croatia into the quarterfinals. He celebrated by lifting up his jersey to reveal a shirt with a picture of an old friend. Subasic had been wearing variations of this shirt under his jersey for 10 years, and after the biggest moment of his career, he revealed it to the world. The man in the picture was Hrvoje Čustić, a Croatian under-21 international with great promise who was playing alongside Subasic for Croatian side NK Zadar in 2008, when in one match he collided with a concrete wall on the side of the pitch, hitting his head. Čustić was put into a coma but died 3 days later. He was just 24. From then on, Subasic wore Čustic's image on a shirt under his goalkeeper jersey to honor his memory. He broke down in tears when explaining the meaning of the shirt to the media after the match and says, "Hrvoje will always be with me, not only on a t-shirt but also in my heart." Subasic's goalkeeping heroics took Croatia all the way to the World Cup final that summer, but that image of Čustić was not seen again. FIFA, showing a complete lack of empathy, banned Subasic from revealing the shirt. Some World Cup teams inspire neutrals with their dazzling play or underdog heroics, but it's probably fair to say that Germany aren't many people's second favorite team, as Die Mannschaft have been known for their rough, efficient, but rather dull defense-first football. But in 2006, Germany hosted the World Cup and tried to change that image with a young, progressive, high-energy, attack-minded team under head coach Jurgen Klinsmann, and with the World Cup giving the country a chance to show a united, modern Germany of East and West, Klinsmann's side inspired the nation and created a party atmosphere across Germany as the free-scoring team cruised through the group stage and reached the semi-final. But all parties have to come to an end, and Germany's ended in the cruelest way possible when, in what was probably the game of the tournament, Italy broke Germany's heart when they scored in the 119th minute to knock Germany out of their home tournament and drive their fans to tears as their dreams of glory were shattered. Now, playing for the national team brings a huge amount of pressure, and for some star players who have the weight of their team and their whole country on their shoulders, the pressure is almost unbearable. Son Heung-min's star power as probably the best Korean footballer of all time meant that in 2018, the entire Korean national team relied on him to do something special. But Korea were poor in their opening game against Sweden and lost the match 1-0, so they were under huge pressure to get a result against Mexico in their second game. But despite Son Heung-min's incredible curled shot into the corner to pull one goal back for Korea, they lost 2-1 and were effectively out of the World Cup. In the dressing room later, people could see how much the World Cup means to everyone involved as the president of South Korea came into the dressing room to speak to and console the players. And even though before the tournament, Son had promised not to cry, at that moment, Son felt like he had let everyone down and he burst into tears in front of the president, his face distraught with emotion, and his moment of vulnerability was cruelly captured by the internet, where it became the "Cheers, Son's crying" meme. But Son would get some redemption in his next match as he would score against Germany as South Korea beat the world champions 2-0 and eliminated them from the World Cup. And Sonny isn't the only player who let the weight of expectation get the better of him, as a single moment in the World Cup has caused players to become the most hated people in their country. But staying with 2018, and Panama were a surprise addition to the tournament, qualifying at the expense of the USA. But in a group with England, Belgium, and Tunisia, they were absolute underdogs. And things started badly as Panama lost 3-0 to Belgium, and then, in their next game, England just kept scoring and were 6-0 ahead after just over an hour, with even Jesse Lingard scoring for England. Most teams in this situation would just give up, but Panama just kept fighting, and late in the game, they got a free kick in a good position, and the ball was played into 37-year-old captain Felipe Baloy, who slid in and knocked the ball past England goalkeeper Jordan Pickford to score Panama's first ever goal at the World Cup. Their fans celebrated the goal as if they'd won the World Cup, showing how much the tournament means to people around the world. And even England fans applauded this historic feat as Panama ended the match with their heads held high and showed that even if things aren't going your way, if you refuse to give up, then maybe you'll get your reward at the end. And that's the power of the World Cup, as it brings together the entire nation who, no matter the time difference, will find a way to watch the match, crowding around TVs at bars, at friends' houses, or in the street. For Brazil, the World Cup is life, but in 2018, they got off to a bad start, drawing 1-1 with Switzerland and then struggling against Costa Rica until late goals by Coutinho and Neymar turned things around. During that match against Costa Rica, a photograph of a young Brazilian fan went viral as the 12-year-old fan watching the match on TV in the Vila Cruzeiro favela couldn't afford an official Brazil kit and instead was wearing a homemade jersey, a yellow shirt with Coutinho 11 written on the back in green pen, proving that despite not having the money, he was desperate to show his love for Brazil and his idols as he forgot about life's hardships and put his hopes and dreams in the hands of 11 men on the other side of the world. Somehow, this picture reached Coutinho, and the Barcelona star responded by sending the boy his official Brazil shirt and some other gifts, as he knew that this would mean the world to his young fan. But the World Cup means so much that some people take things too far, and a poor performances even led to the death of one player. But this next player was left clinically depressed after he became the most hated man in the country. England were playing arch rivals Argentina in the round of 16 of the 1998 World Cup, and this match was basically a derby match, as the wounds of the Falklands War and of Diego Maradona's Hand of God had taken the rivalry between the countries to the next level. The scores were tied at 2-2 when David Beckham was fouled by Diego Simeone, but after the foul, Beckham was lying on the floor when he lashed out and kicked Simeone. Although the kick had no power, Simeone fell to the ground like he'd been shot, and the referee sent David Beckham off. Without their talismanic midfielder, England couldn't find a way to score against Argentina and exited the World Cup to a familiar penalty shootout heartbreak. But for Beckham, worse was to come, as the English media blamed him for the World Cup exit, with headlines like 10 brave lions, 1 silly boy. One newspaper published a dartboard with Beckham's face in the middle of it. The English public also took things too far, hanging an effigy of Beckham in a mock execution and booing him relentlessly on the pitch and cheering every brutal tackle on him like it was a goal. This abuse left Beckham clinically depressed, vulnerable, and alone as the whole country hated him. Somehow, Beckham found a new level of mental strength and went on to win the UEFA Footballer of the Year that season as Man United won the treble. And there's another footballer who had an even more incredible comeback from the brink, but sometimes defeat is so tough that it can literally break a nation's heart. The 1950 World Cup technically didn't have a final, instead being decided by a group stage. But with Brazil going into the final match at the top of the group, all they had to do was avoid defeat against Uruguay and they would be champion. Brazil had been so dominant that World Cup and in the years before that the press had even started declaring them champions before the match and medals were even made with the players' names on them. And this was because Brazil had absolutely destroyed other South American teams recently, and the last time they played Uruguay, they won 5-1, as well as winning their two other group stage games 7-1 against Sweden and 6-1 against Spain. So the match against Uruguay looked like a foregone conclusion. When it came to the match, huge numbers of fans squeezed into the Maracana Stadium, with some estimates saying more than 200,000 people were in the stands. But Uruguay were not going to roll over, and they even bought some of the newspapers with World Champions headlines on them and then urinated on the paper. Brazil just couldn't find a way past Uruguay, who kept the scores goalless at halftime. Even though Brazil scored at the start of the second half, Uruguay came back and scored twice for a shock 2-1 victory. Brazil's fans just could not believe it. The 200,000 fans were stunned into absolute silence. The country practically went into mourning as men cried into their beers long into the evening. The shock was so much that Brazil even changed their kit color from white to yellow, as the old kit was seen as unpatriotic. But Brazil would have plenty of World Cup success in the future, thanks to legends such as Pelé, Garrincha, and Tostão. But when Tostão won the World Cup in 1970, he cried for the final 20 minutes of the match, completely overwhelmed by emotion. Tostão was seen as the new king of Brazilian football and was voted one of Brazil's top 5 players of the 20th century, and as possibly the world's first false nine. He was the key creator whose vision and passing unlocked the immense talents of Pelé. But shortly before the tournament, Tostão suffered a devastating injury while playing for Cruzeiro when a ball struck him in the face and he suffered a detached retina that could have led to him losing his eyesight. But he flew to the USA for emergency surgery to save his vision. Despite this, playing football again was a real challenge, and he was close to missing out on the World Cup. Luckily, he recovered enough to get the call-up. His vision and skill was crucial, providing the key pass when Brazil beat England, then scoring twice against Peru and combining with Pelé for Pelé's opener against Uruguay. So, in the final, when Brazil beat Italy 4-1, Tostão cried for the final 20 minutes of the game, overwhelmed by emotion as he realized Brazil were to be world champions. And after the game, he gave his medal to the ophthalmologist who saved his eyesight and soon retired from football to become a doctor. But while rare, injuries like Tostão's, or even worse, do happen in football. In 2009, during a preseason tour of Italy, Espanyol's captain Dani Jarque suffered a heart attack in his hotel room and died. He was 26 and left behind his girlfriend, who was 7 months pregnant. Spanish football went into mourning, and many players who were close to the former Spain under-21 footballer really suffered after his death and wanted to do something to commemorate his life. Spain's star midfielder Andrés Iniesta said that after Dani Jarque's death, he had no passion in life and felt empty inside. Iniesta spent the next season struggling with injuries and suffering mentally. He came close to not even going to the following summer's World Cup. Dani Jarque was part of a golden generation of Spanish footballers, and though he never made the full national team, his former youth teammates had a chance in 2010 to end Spain's World Cup curse and finally become world champions. Spain beat Portugal and Germany in the knockout rounds to reach the final in Johannesburg against the Netherlands, and at this moment, Iniesta decided he wanted to make a tribute to his fallen friend. So he got one of the staff to write a message on his undershirt. The final itself was a brutal game, and neither side could find the breakthrough until the game went into extra time, and in the 117th minute, Spain finally found a breakthrough as Cesc Fabregas passed the ball to Iniesta, who smashed the ball into the corner of the goal to win the World Cup for Spain. So Iniesta ripped off his shirt to reveal the message, Dani Jarque, always with us. The referee booked Iniesta for his celebration, but in that 117th minute of the match, Iniesta didn't just score a goal. He ended his country's World Cup curse, put his own demons out, and gave his friend the send-off he deserved. But death on the football pitch doesn't always come from health problems. In 1994, Colombia lost their opening match to Romania, meaning all the pressure was on their second game against the USA, as a defeat would see them going home home early. Amid this pressure, one Colombian player made a mistake that would have fatal consequences. In the 35th minute of the match at Pasadena's Rose Bowl, Colombia's center back Andres Escobar, a clean, calm defender nicknamed the Gentleman, misread a cross, and 93,000 fans watched as it deflected into his own net to give the USA the lead, and Colombia went on to lose the crucial match 2-1. Despite winning their final game, Colombia were eliminated from the World Cup, and 5 days later, Escobar, who was engaged to be married later that year, was back in his hometown of Medellin, which was known for drug violence. As Escobar was walking across a parking lot, he was confronted and shot 6 times. After every shot, the shooter said the word goal. Escobar was left for dead in the parking lot, and when he was eventually taken to hospital, it was too late. Andres Escobar died at the age of 27, killed for scoring an own goal. Before his death, he had called the World Cup the most amazing and rare experience, saying, "We'll see each other again soon because life does not end here." More than 100,000 fans attended his funeral, and the whole world was in shock at his death. No footballer should walk onto the pitch fearing for his life, and nothing that happens on the pitch should lead to anyone suffering Andres Escobar's fate. But these are some of the most brutal fouls in World Cup history. And starting with the fastest red card in World Cup history, this is Jose Batista, and in Mexico '86, he found his country Uruguay in arguably the group of death. But Jose took this word death a bit too literally. Uruguay were in a group with Denmark, West Germany, and Scotland, who were managed by none other than the legendary Sir Alex Ferguson. And in their final match, Uruguay needed to avoid defeat to Scotland for a chance of making the next round. But Batista decided to take it to a different level by smashing into Scotland's Gordon Strachan while fans were still settling into their seats. So, within less than a minute of the match, Batista saw red in what was the fastest red card of a World Cup game. But Scotland couldn't find a way to score despite playing basically the whole game with a man extra, so somehow Uruguay made it through despite what had just happened. Batista finished his international career with 14 caps for Uruguay, but I'm not sure this one should have counted. But if you thought that was crazy, what happened in Italia '90 was even more brutal. Italia '90 won football fans' hearts in England and was seen as a turning point that kickstarted the modern game. But the football itself was certainly far from beautiful, with lots of dull, negative football with some brutal tackles flying in all over the place. But 2 tackles that changed England's relationship with the game were performed by midfield maestro Paul Gascoigne. Gaza was the creative genius behind England's run to the semi-finals, but the line between genius and madness is wafer thin, and Gascoigne often strayed on the wrong side of that line, famously ruining his career by injuring himself doing brutal fouls in the 1991 FA Cup final. But the summer before that, his self-destruction was on display for the whole world to see. First off, in England's round of 16 match against Belgium, Gaza was frustrated by England's inability to score, so decided a 2-footed launch into the back of Belgium's Enzo Schifo, and that foul would have been a red card by today's standards, but Gaza only got a yellow. But that meant one more yellow and he'd miss the next game. Then, in the semi-final against West Germany, Gaza again showed too much enthusiasm to foul Thomas Berthold and get a yellow card that would mean that if England won, he would miss the World Cup final. And so Gaza was in tears, crying that he had let himself and his country down. So Gary Lineker had to tell the England coaches to keep a close eye on him and make sure he didn't get himself sent off. And because he was so emotional, he didn't take a penalty in the shootout that England eventually lost. And as we said, Italia '90 was a quite dirty tournament, and one game that really showed that was West Germany's round of 16 match against the Netherlands. These guys really couldn't get along, with bad tackles galore, but 2 players especially couldn't get along. Germany's Rudi Völler and the Netherlands' Frank Rijkaard seemed more intent on winding each other up than actually playing football, and within the space of a few minutes, both players needlessly got themselves sent off. It started with Rijkaard's crude tackle on Völler, which earned the Dutchman a yellow card. So far, fair enough. But when jogging back into position to defend the resulting free kick, Rijkaard spat in Völler's hair. Seriously, these are some disgusting playground moves, unnoticed by the referee but seen in slow-mo by millions on TV. And Völler was obviously incensed, and so told Rijkaard what he thought of this before giving the referee an earful too. And so he was also booked, which seems pretty harsh given what had just happened, and when the free kick was headed to the Dutch goalie, Voller pointlessly jumped at him and rolled over, causing another confrontation with Rijkaard, who then stamped on his foot, and somehow, after all of that, the referee gave Voller a second yellow card. So despite basically doing nothing, he got sent off. And then, when moments later Rijkaard also got a second yellow and received his marching orders, he spat in Voller's hair again. That'll teach him for having an 80s style perm. But when it comes to World Cup brutal fouls, we're still very much in the group stage of the tournament, as the worst are yet to come, including the two most violent games in World Cup history. And to see more videos like this, hit subscribe. But back at the 2002 World Cup, South Korea had several questionable refereeing decisions that went their way, but they also were on the end of some painful fouls, like in the round of 16, when Italy's Christian Vieri broke Kim Tae-young's nose. And people forget that on their run to the semifinals, Korea actually finished top of their group after drawing with the USA and beating Poland and Portugal. And the soon-to-be Manchester United legend Park Ji-sung got the winning goal against Portugal, but he could have ended up injured after this horrific tackle. In the 27th minute of a rather scrappy match, Portugal's João Pinto decided it was a good idea to launch himself through the air into the back of Park Ji-sung's knee. And this was as clear-cut as a red card can be, but somehow Pinto thought his foul was acceptable. Nope, rather, it was an early bath for Pinto and an early exit for Portugal. And Christian Vieri isn't the first Italian to break an opponent's nose at the World Cup, as in 1994, there was an elbow so bad that it led to a historic ban. The quarterfinal between Spain and Italy might be remembered for Roberto Baggio's late winner, but Italy really should have finished the game with 10 players after a horrendous elbow by Mauro Tassotti, who struck Spain's Luis Enrique square in the face, breaking his nose. But luckily for Tassotti, the referee was looking the other way at the time and didn't spot his attempt at an on-pitch rhinoplasty. I mean, the blood running down Enrique's face should have given him a hint, and although Tassotti says he tried to apologize, Enrique demanded action. But Italy's manager Arrigo Sacchi blamed Enrique, saying he got elbowed because he pulled Tassotti's shirt. But while Tassotti avoided any punishment during the game, FIFA's long arm of the law came after him later and handed him a record 8-game ban based on video evidence, and that ban ended his international career as he never played for Italy again, much to the relief of opposition noses everywhere. Back in 1970, footballers were used to hard tackles, and England were as tough as they come. They even had a player called Norman Bites Your Legs Hunter, so if you played against the Three Lions, you would probably know about it afterward. But without video analysis, nobody quite knew what the opponents would be like. And when England played Romania in their opening game, they were in for a shock, as Romania's left back Mihai Mocanu played football as if his boots contained homing missiles targeted at England players' legs. His first target was England's right back Terry Newton, who he injured so badly that Newton needed benching. Next up was his replacement Tommy Wright, and then he tackled Franny Lee with a high 2-footed tackle so bad that Lee said he had identical stud marks in each knee. Now, that's a painful way to start the World Cup. And when it comes to rough World Cup matches, wait till you see the 1962 tournament. In those days, red and yellow cards didn't exist as we know them today. Instead, the referee would just tell players to leave the field. And this happened twice in this next match, but that was just the start of the on-pitch violence. You know a game is bad when it's called a battle? And this game was so violent, it was dubbed the Battle of Santiago. Chile were World Cup hosts, and some Italian journalists didn't seem to think much of the host nation, describing Santiago as a backwater dump and questioning the morality of Chilean women. And so when Chile played Italy in a group stage match, players were angry even before the start of the match. And it only took a few seconds of the match before the first foul. Then, after just 8 minutes, Italy's Giorgio Ferrini was sent off but refused to leave the pitch, and policemen had to come onto the pitch to remove him. And that caused some of the other players to lose their heads and have a full-on punch-up, where a punch by Chile's Leonel Sanchez left an Italian player with a broken nose. And as the referee missed most of the punches thrown, the players themselves spent the rest of the game trying to get revenge on each other with off-the-ball slaps and kicks, and after the linesman didn't spot Sanchez slapping Italy's Mario David, he took vigilante action and tried to kick Sanchez in the head, leading to the second sending off of the match, and the violence continued, causing the police to enter the pitch to intervene 3 more times. And the referee later said, "I wasn't reffing a football match, I was acting as an umpire in military maneuvers." And while Chile won 2-0, the BBC called the match the most stupid, appalling, disgusting, and disgraceful exhibition of football possibly in the history of the game. As for the referee, he went on to invent yellow and red cards, and we'll be seeing plenty of those in the games coming up, but this next offender perhaps needs a menu card instead. Footballers at the World Cup don't often dive into the local cuisine, but at the Brazil 2014 World Cup, Luis Suarez decided he would prefer an Italian. You know where this is going. Suarez had already been banned twice for biting players in his career, getting a 7-game ban while at Ajax and a 10-game ban for biting Chelsea's Branislav Ivanovic while playing for Liverpool. But he went into Uruguay's match as a hero after scoring twice to eliminate England in the game before, and earlier in this match, Italy had a player sent off for a high tackle, leading Italy's coach to claim the referee was biased. So he must have lost his mind when in the 79th minute, Suarez took a bite out of Giorgio Chiellini and then fell over and held his face, pretending that he has hurt his teeth. Luckily for Suarez, the referee missed his chomp and ignored Chiellini even when he showed the bite marks on his shoulder. And Italy's players were too busy protesting the decision, so they conceded a corner from which Uruguay scored the winning goal. But afterward, FIFA did recognize the bite, and Luis Suarez was a serial offender, so they banned him for 9 games. And when it comes to brutal fouls, we're well into the knockout rounds of the World Cup now, as some of these next fouls are basically assaults, full-on GBH, and this next one was so bad that people in France voted this next guy as worse than Hitler. France were playing West Germany in the 1982 World Cup semi-final, and French player Patrick Battiston was through on goal. But when German goalkeeper Harald Schumacher smashed into him at full speed, not even looking at the ball, and he hit Battiston so hard that it put him into a coma. He needed oxygen and damaged his back, lost several teeth, and cracked 3 ribs. France's captain Michel Platini even said he thought Battiston was dead. The referee thought otherwise and actually let play continue for a while before allowing medics to treat him. But Schumacher didn't care at all and even did keepy-uppies while waiting for Battiston to be stretchered off. And when asked about the foul after the game, he joked that he'd pay for Battiston's dentures. But French players are no saints either, and this next player gave the world one of the most iconic World Cup final moments of all time, but not in a good way. When somebody scores a worldie, you might say, stick it in the Louvre. But this next incident was made into a bronze statue for Paris's Pompidou Center Museum. Zinedine Zidane is one of France's all-time greats, but will be remembered for his final act as a professional footballer. In the 2006 World Cup final between France and Italy, few remember that Zidane scored the opening goal and that Marco Materazzi scored Italy's equalizer. That's because after the game finished 1-1 and went to extra time, Materazzi was marking Zidane a little too closely, grabbing onto his shirt to stop him from getting on the end of any crosses. So Zidane told him, "If you want my shirt, I'll give it to you after the game." But Materazzi replied, "I'd rather have your sister." And Zidane lost it completely and headbutted Materazzi, who fell to the ground. Straight red card for Zidane in what would be his final match. And without him, France lost the final on penalties. This next match also saw a football legend. This time, Portugal's Luis Figo gets sent off for a headbutt, but that's only a fraction of what happened at a game dubbed the Battle of Nuremberg. The 2006 World Cup knockout match between Portugal and the Netherlands broke records for the most cards shown in an international tournament game, with referee Valentin Ivanov handing out a record 16 yellow cards and 4 red cards. Mark van Bommel was first up, getting booked after just 2 minutes, and soon after, Khalid Boularus got a yellow for a foul on Cristiano Ronaldo that forced the Portuguese star off injured, with Ronaldo later saying the foul was a deliberate attempt to injure him. Portugal then scored to take the lead, but by halftime, they would be down to 10 men as Castilla picked up 2 yellow cards. But it was the second half which would go down in history, starting with Giovanni von Bronckhorst fouling Luis Figo, who replied by headbutting him and only got a yellow card. And Figo was soon hacked down again by Bularuz, who got a second yellow card, and that tackle also caused a scrap on the touchline. And not long after, there was another brawl, this time after the Netherlands didn't give the ball back after Portugal kicked it out so that an injured player could get treatment. And by this time, the yellow cards were really piling up. They weren't just for fighting, but for time wasting or talking back to the referee. And it wasn't long before another player got a second yellow card. This time, it was Portugal's Deco for preventing a quick free kick, and then, right at the end of the game, Van Bronckhorst got his second yellow, leaving each team with 9 players each. But it wasn't as if there was too much bad blood between the players, as the red-carded Van Bronckhorst, Deco, and Bularuz all sat together to chat and watch the rest of the game in what was dubbed the Bad Boys Corner. And now we are well and truly into the semifinals of World Cup bad tackles, and this next tackle was so bonkers, the offending player lost his own shoe. Now, at the World Cup, there's always one team that surprises everyone. That goes far further than anyone thought possible, whether it's Morocco in 2022 or South Korea in 2002. But at Italia 90, it was Cameroon, who, inspired by star player Roger Milla, who came out of retirement for the tournament, went further in the competition than any African team before them. And they did that by fouling players a lot. Cameroon started that good run off with a surprise 1-0 win against Argentina, but after spending 90 minutes kicking lumps out of Diego Maradona, they finished that game with just 9 men. First, Andre Canabiik was sent off after 61 minutes, and then right near the end, Benjamin Massing did everything in his power to stop an Argentina attack. Argentina's Claudio Caniggia got past one man to start a counterattack, and then Cameroon's Victor Ndiaye tried to take him out with a tactical foul. But when Caniggia didn't go down, Massing took things in his own hands and lunged at the already off-balance Argentinian, utterly wiping him out and losing his own boot in the process, in a tackle described as an attempt to separate Caniggia's legs from the rest of his body. And so the referee had no choice but to give him a yellow card? Yep, not even a red for this cynical, brutal foul. But Massing already had 1 yellow card, so that meant he was sent off. And Cameroon finished the game with 9 men, but won the match, and their fairy tale story of thuggery took them all the way to extra time in the quarterfinals. And the next World Cup, USA 94, saw an even more shocking foul. The USA reached the knockout stages, where the hosts faced Brazil, but this match was certainly not the beautiful game, and as it was played on US Independence Day, there's no surprise that there were fireworks, as Brazil's Leonardo elbowed the USA's Tab Ramos in the face so hard that it fractured Ramos's skull and left him unconscious and with some bleeding on the brain. And Ramos was in hospital for the next 3.5 months, so unsurprisingly, Leonardo was sent off and FIFA banned him for 4 matches, which, at the time, was their second longest suspension, and which meant he missed the rest of the World Cup and had to watch Brazil's win in the final from the stands, which is still preferable to a hospital bed. But the worst tackle of the World Cup, perhaps unsurprisingly, came in Spain's World Cup final win against the Netherlands in 2010. And this was Spain at the peak of tiki-taka, so it was impossible to beat them by playing nice, which is perhaps why the Dutch decided to kick them off the park. Referee Howard Webb handed out 14 yellow cards in the game and sent off the Netherlands' John Heitinga in what he called an extremely challenging match to handle. But the moment the match is best remembered for is not Andreas Iniesta's late goal to win the match for Spain, but Nigel de Jong's kung fu kick on Xabi Alonso. De Jong got his legs so high that his studs went right into the middle of Alonso's chest, even though Alonso was in the air at that time, and there was absolutely no way De Jong was ever going to win the ball. And this Street Fighter style attack was a clear red for anyone who saw it, but Webb didn't see it properly and only deemed this foul worthy of a yellow card. But what do you think? Do you agree, or should De Jong have seen red? Let me know in the comments below.